Hello, my name is Amy Kahn, Director of Student Financial Services at Hofstra University. Welcome and thank you for joining us. In today's webinar, we will discuss various undergraduate financial aid programs, how and when to apply, filing the FAFSA, and provide helpful resources. At the end of the presentation, we will answer as many questions as time will allow. If we are not able to answer your question during the webinar, we will email the response to you individually. Please feel free to type in your questions throughout the presentation. Within a few days after the webinar, you will be emailed a link to the recorded version of the presentation. Now let's begin. Financial aid is comprised of three major categories. Grants and scholarships are known as gift aid. Loans, which can be in the form of a student loan or parent loans, which are repaid with interest, and federal work study, a program which allows students to work and earn money to help pay for college in the form of a paycheck. Gift aid can come from both university and outside sources such as local civic associations. At Hofstra, merit-based aid is determined simply by filing the application for admission. There is no separate application for merit-based aid. If the student is eligible for merit aid, the notification will be included with the letter of acceptance from the Office of Admission. Institutional grants at Hofstra require the FAFSA application. Hofstra begins to send out financial aid packages based on the FAFSA applications received the beginning of March. The Pell and SEOG grants are federal grants which are awarded to students demonstrating exceptional financial need as calculated by the FAFSA. The Tuition Assistance Program, TAP, is a grant offered to eligible New York State residents attending a college located in New York State. The TAP application is provided by a link upon completing the FAFSA. Additional scholarships and grants can be applied for at various scholarship search sites online, such as finaid.org, fastweb.com, scholarships.com, and collegeboard.com. The next category of financial aid we will discuss is education loans. The Stafford is a student loan divided into two categories, subsidized and unsubsidized. The eligibility for subsidized versus unsubsidized is determined by the FAFSA. The interest on the subsidized loan is paid by the government while the student is in college, whereas the unsubsidized loan interest accrues while the student is in college. The interest rate is currently at 3.86% with a loan fee of 1.072%. The student has the option to repay these loans while in college, but most students defer and repay when it is required, which is 6 months after graduation. The maximum borrowing limit for new dependent students is $5,500 for a year. For independent students, it is $9,500. The Perkins Loan is a small student loan program offered to students who demonstrate exceptional financial need, again as calculated by the FAFSA. It is 5% interest and repayment begins 9 months after graduation. The award is approximately $1,400 for the year, and it does not have a loan fee. The Federal Parent Plus loan is borrowed and required to be repaid by the parent. The parent must be approved by a credit check performed by the Department of Education. If the parent is experiencing financial difficulties, he or she can apply with an endorser, which is kind of like a cosigner. The PLUS loan can be deferred to repay after the student graduates. It is 6.41% interest, and as long as the parent or parent with the endorser passes the credit check, the parent can borrow as much needed to cover the entire cost of education for the year, including room, dining plans, and even more to get refunded to pay for other out-of-pocket costs like transportation. The PLUS loan fee has a 4.288% loan fee. Other types of loans to help finance education include alternative student loans, which the student would have to apply with a creditworthy cosigner, and parent home equity loans. For more information on loan programs and how to apply, please see our webpage, hofstra.edu/learnaboutloans. Federal Work Study is a program where students work to earn a paycheck. It is not deducted from the tuition bill. This gives the students the opportunity to not only earn money to help pay for college expenses, it also provides real work experience to help build their resume. Although Federal Work Study eligibility may be indicated on the financial aid award package, students will need to apply for the jobs and be hired for them. The positions are not guaranteed. Federal Work Study earnings do have to be reported on the next year's FAFSA. However, unlike other types of income, it does not actually count against the student in the calculation for federal student aid. And now we will discuss filing the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, for 2014-2015. The financial aid application time begins after January 1st of the student's senior year in high school. The free application for federal student aid is filed at FAFSA.gov. At the end of filing the FAFSA, a link will be provided to New York State residents to apply for TAP at hesc.ny.gov. If you miss the link, you should wait approximately 3 to 5 business days and go directly to hesc.ny.gov to apply. Some, but not all, other state aid programs require the FAFSA as well. See the full list at FAFSA.gov. In addition to the federal and state applications for financial aid, some 400 colleges, universities, and scholarship programs may require students to file the CSS profile application at collegeboard.org. Hofstra University does not require the profile application. So why should you file the FAFSA? Well, it's free, and it determines eligibility for federal grants, loans, and work study. Some states, including New York, require it as the first part of an application process for financial aid from that state. And some colleges and private organizations require it for consideration and scholarships and grants, just like Hofstra. Should I hire a consultant to help me file the FAFSA? We do not recommend paying a fee when you can get the help you need for free. Specialized FAFSA representatives are available to assist you step by step through the entire application at 1-800-4FED-AID. Or you can click the Live Help button to chat with a FAFSA representative. What is the difference between FAFSA.gov and FAFSA.com? FAFSA.gov is the official Federal Department of Education website for filing the FAFSA. FAFSA.com is a private company which provides an advisory service and charges a fee. Again, why should you pay a fee when you can get it for free? So step 1 in filing the FAFSA begins with applying for a federal personal identification number at pen.ed.gov. A PIN is required for both the student applicant and one parent if the student is dependent. Each student FAFSA filer, including siblings, must have a separate PIN. The parent uses his or her same PIN for each child filing a FAFSA. So in simple terms, think of the PIN as like a Social Security number. Each individual person keeps the same federal PIN number for life. The PIN allows you to also complete the federal direct loan applications. You will use the same PIN numbers to file the the FAFSA every year, so be sure to keep your PIN in a secure place. And again, for assistance, call 1-800-4FED-AID. Step 2, after January 1st, you will be filing the FAFSA. You should be collecting the documents needed to apply for both the student and parent. Also, for this year, for 2014-15, we would be collecting all sources of 2013 taxed and untaxed income, such as income tax returns, W-2 forms, benefit statements, etc. In addition, asset information, such as your most recent bank statements, investments, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, etc. Your Social Security numbers, the student driver's license number, if he or she has one, and an alien registration number if the student has one. So what are the common mistakes people make when completing the FAFSA that you should try to avoid? Firstly, not asking for help. You have experts that will literally walk you step by step through the entire application. Make sure that you file the correct FAFSA for the correct age year. So if your student is going to be attending this coming fall, 2014, you would need to file the 2014-15 FAFSA. Do not use nicknames. Make sure you use names as they appear on your Social Security card. And make sure you're using the correct Social Security number. Do not list parent income twice, meaning do not list parent's income under the parent as well as the student. Make sure both the student and parent's signatures go through. You will receive an email confirmation of the FAFSA within a couple of days, so you can review it to make sure that it's okay. Step 3, you will want to print a FAFSA on the web worksheet. The worksheet is used as a helpful tool to organize your information and cut down on the time you need to complete the FAFSA when you sit down at the computer to enter it online. Do not mail the worksheet to FAFSA or to colleges. Again, for step-by-step assistance, the FAFSA representatives are there to help you. So as you're completing the FAFSA, there are many questions relevant that could be answered yes or no. Some of these will allow you to perform an additional registration, like with selective service. So registration is a requirement for young men which preserves America's ability to provide manpower in an emergency to the United States Armed Forces. Almost all men ages 18 through 25 must register. Since this is a federal requirement, it is required for qualified male students to apply for federal financial aid. Students can register directly online at sss.gov or on the FAFSA by checking yes. When filing the FAFSA, it is important to understand that principles of federal financial need analysis is that paying for college is a partnership. An equitable and consistent formula applies based on the dependency status of the student. A parent contribution and a student contribution equals the expected family contribution. A snapshot of the family's current financial condition, allowing for consideration of loss of income, special circumstances such as unemployment, disability, separation, divorce, or death of a parent, excessive medical, dental expenses paid out of pocket, etc. Most financial aid offices have a special form for this. At Hofstra, we call this our reevaluation form. So if you have a special circumstance, by all means, please contact our office. We'll have the contact information at the end of the webinar, and we will provide that form for you. Dependent students must file the FAFSA with the parent with whom they've lived the most the last 12 months, regardless of who claimed the student on their tax return. If the parent is remarried, the step-parent's information must be reported. Okay, I just want to mention that, again, at the beginning of the presentation, we did mention that we are recording this webinar, and you will receive an email with the link to the presentation. So if you are trying to furiously make notes, never fear, you will receive the presentation. Okay, so who is a parent when filing the FAFSA? Biological or step parents married to the parent the student lives with, or an adoptive parent. Now, brand new for 2014-15, if the parents are living in the same household, you must report information for both parents, even if the parents are separated, divorced, or a same-gender marriage. Who is not a parent when filing the FAFSA? Grandparents, foster parents, legal guardians, aunts and uncles are not parents for filing the FAFSA unless they legally adopted the student before the student turned 13 years old. Students are considered independent, meaning they do not have to include parent information on the FAFSA if they can answer yes to one or more of the questions below. So for 2014-2015, a student would be automatically independent if they were born before January 1st, 1991, if the student was married, and so on. So I'll give you a moment to just review that slide. Again, the principles of federal need analysis is calculated by the FAFSA and takes into consideration parent information. So being independent as an undergraduate is somewhat unusual. If you have any questions regarding your status, please feel free to contact our office at Hofstra or 1-800-4FED-AID. Continuing on with the FAFSA questions, my parents are separated or divorced and living apart. Whose information do I put on the FAFSA? You should be reporting the information for the parent the student lived with the most the past 12 months, regardless of who claims the student on their tax return. If the student did not live with one parent more than the other, then you must report the information for the parent who provided the most financial support. If parents are separated or divorced but still living in the same household, you must report information for both parents. Again, that part is brand new for 2014. If the parents are separated or divorced but still living in the same household, you must report information for both parents for 2014-2015. Do parents have to be legally separated to file the FAFSA as separated? No, but most colleges will ask for proof of separate residences, such as a copy of a lease and utility bills. My step-parent is not responsible for supporting me. Why do I have to report his or her information on the FAFSA? It is required by federal financial aid regulations. If the parent you reside with is remarried, you must report your step-parent's information on the FAFSA. My parents do not have Social Security numbers. How do I complete that area of the FAFSA? You would enter 0 in all the spaces asking for parents' Social Security numbers if they don't have them. We have not yet completed our 2013 federal income tax returns. How do we complete the FAFSA? You would check the box indicating you have not yet filed and enter estimated income. Once your tax returns have been filed, you can return to the FAFSA to change the information. The FAFSA requires us to report the net worth of our investments. What does that mean? The net worth is the current value of all your investments required to be reported on the FAFSA minus debt. And be sure to only subtract debt from properties other than your primary residence, like a vacation home or rental property, because your primary residence is not counted on the FAFSA at all. So what kind of investments are included on the FAFSA? Real estate, again, it's like vacation homes, rental properties do get counted, but do not include the home you live in unless a portion of it is rented out. Then you would only report the proportion of the rented portion. You would also include trust funds, UGMA and UTMA accounts, money market funds, mutual funds, certificates of deposit, stocks, stock options, bonds, other securities, installment and land sale contracts, including any mortgages held, commodities, etc., qualified educational benefits or education savings accounts, Coverdell savings accounts, 529 college savings plans, and the refund value of 529 prepaid tuition plans. How are 529 plans reported on the FAFSA? And we make this a separate question because this is really the most popular savings vehicle. But 529 plans are reported under the owner as an investment, not the beneficiary. So if the parent is the owner, it is reported under the parent investment question. And if the parent has more than one 529 plan for various members of the family, including siblings of the student, the total value of all plans must be reported under the parent asset section. Besides the home we live in, are there any investments we do not include on the FAFSA? You do not include the value of life insurance, retirement plans, including 401k plans, pension funds, annuities, non-education IRAs, KEO plans, etc. So you're not including the total value of your life insurance and any retirement plans. And make sure that you don't count something twice. So like the UGMA and the UTMA accounts for which you are the custodian but not the owner, or cash savings and checking accounts which were already reported on the FAFSA. So be sure that if you do have some assets that are included, that you're only including them once. How do I find out the federal college codes of the schools I want to apply to? There is a search online when you're completing the FAFSA. You can ask the colleges directly or call the FAFSA toll-free number. Hofstra's federal school code is 002732. I can only send the FAFSA to 10 colleges online. What if I need to send the FAFSA to more? You can change the codes by going back into the FAFSA online or call 1-800-4FED-AID and do it over the phone. That's the only change you can do to the FAFSA over the phone. But by doing this, you're actually removing some of the previous schools listed, and therefore any future changes to the FAFSA will only be sent to the 10 schools most recently listed on the FAFSA. So I would advise you, if you're going to do this, that you would replace the ones that the student is least likely to go to. I'm interested in living on campus but not sure. Which answer should I indicate on the FAFSA? For each college code you need to indicate on the FAFSA, you will need to also indicate the corresponding housing status. If you're interested in living on campus, you should definitely indicate on campus. If you need to change the status later to with parent or off campus, you should inform each financial aid office directly. What is the difference between with parent and off-campus housing status? With parent means the students will be commuting from their parents' or other relatives' home. Off-campus means the student will be commuting from his or own home or apartment. There is no place to indicate special circumstances such as loss of income on the FAFSA. Can I request a reevaluation? Yes. Again, most colleges do have a special form for this. You would need to contact each college financial aid office, explain your circumstance, and ask the proper procedures. What if I have to make corrections to my FAFSA after I file it? you would simply return to FAFSA.gov and make the corrections online. And again, the federal representatives are there to help you through the original application as well as making any changes. How do I apply for the Tuition Assistance Program, TAP? Again, there will be a link for New York State residents only to apply for TAP at the end of the FAFSA. If you miss the link, wait approximately 3 to 5 days, then go directly to the TAP website at hesc.ny.gov. And just like the federal toll-free number, HESC also has a toll-free number where they will help you step by step through the application process. So once you've completed your web worksheet, you would then go online and click Start a New FAFSA to begin entering your information. So what happens next? Upon receipt of the FAFSA, a financial aid package will be calculated by the colleges and sent you if you're accepted for admission. At Hofstra, we begin to send the financial aid packages out based on the FAFSA at the beginning of March. Further details regarding required documents will be provided within the financial aid package, and you should accept or decline the financial aid offered to you and return the response to the aid office as soon as possible, but no later than May 1st, the national reply date. Your FAFSA may be selected by the FAFSA processor or by colleges for a process known as verification. If this is the case, you will need to submit documentation so that we can verify and correct any mistakes that you may have made. So you would need to submit your signed 2013 income documentation. We suggest that you request copies of your 2013 federal tax return transcripts in advance, just in case you are selected, so that will help speed up the process for you. And make sure that you do this in a timely manner, because you will not know exactly what your final answer will be for financial aid until you complete the verification process. And that is if you are selected. Don't just send in your income information to colleges automatically. Only send it in if the individual colleges ask for it. Additional aid could be offered upon completion of verification, or it may be adjusted based on any corrections that are necessary. The typical undergraduate financial aid process begins in the fall semester of the student's senior year in high school. So we have provided to you our hofstra.edu scholarship page so you can read about our application processes and the criteria for our various scholarships. Males must register for selective service upon reaching the age of 18 years old. The student and one parent must apply for your federal PIN, so one for the student and one for the parent. If the parent already has a PIN from filing an application for, let's say, the student's sibling, or if they have filed for financial aid for themselves, then they would use the same PIN. It's your same PIN for life. If required by individual colleges, you would file the CSS profile application. But again, this is not required by Hofstra. So after January 1st, this is where we are now. If you're going to be attending college in 2014-15, you would need to go ahead and file the FAFSA. And if you're a New York State resident, go ahead and file the TAP application at the end of filing the FAFSA. In late February, early March, many colleges and universities will begin to send out the full financial aid packages based on the FAFSAs. You would then be informed if you needed to complete the verification. And again, we're just giving you a little heads up to request your tax transcript in advance so that you have that on hand in case you need it. We would ask you then to submit any forms, other kinds of forms if necessary, like your Perkins promissory note if your student was eligible, proof of citizenship status, elective service, and so on. And then in April, May, we would like you to accept or decline the financial aid no later than May 1st, again, the national reply date, and you would pay your tuition and housing deposits sooner if required by the individual colleges. And then in May, there are additional processes for students to file for the Stafford loan as well as parents if you're going to be borrowing the parent loan. And then if you're going to be borrowing the alternative loans, we've provided that website for you there to compare the different alternative student loan programs. We've included some helpful links for financial aid resources. Our Hofstra scholarship page, hofstra.edu/scholarship. For federal financial aid, visit studentaid.gov. For New York State aid, hesc.ny.gov. And for general financial aid information, finaid.org. And now we're going to take some questions. Just a reminder, don't worry if you missed any of the information in the presentation because you will be emailed a link to the presentation in a few days. And if we don't get to all of your individual questions today, we do have quite a number of people registered for the presentation. We will individually email you the response. So our first question is there an application process for institutional grants, or is it determined by the FAFSA? The answer is our institutional grants must be applied for by filing the FAFSA. That is the only way that you can be considered for it. And I highly suggest that you file the FAFSA at least your student's first year in college. You can decide from there if you want to file it in continuing years. But our formula for our institutional grants uses the information from the FAFSA, but it's not the exact same calculation as determining eligibility for, let's say, the Pell Grant or the SEOG grant. So you might be pleasantly surprised that you could be eligible for some of our institutional grants, but you will never know if you don't file the FAFSA. Our next question, do you need to include the retirement data when you have a defined benefit plan that doesn't allow you to take money out of the plan? The value of your retirements, your pensions, your IRAs, all of that, none of that is reported on the FAFSA at all. So the value of your asset, the total value of the worth of those savings plans are not reported on the FAFSA at all. However, if you're taking, let's say, a $2,000 distribution within a year, and that portion is untaxed, then that would be reported in the untaxed income area of the FAFSA. So you have basically two parts of the FAFSA. You have the asset portion, which you would not be including the value, but again, in the income section, if for that particular year you took a distribution out of it, then if it was untaxed income, it would be included on the FAFSA in the untaxed income section. Are loan fees yearly or at one time? They're basically taken off of each distribution of the loan. So let's say Congress votes for the loan fee for 2014-15. The loan is split up into two disbursements. Half of the loan gets sent to the school in the fall semester, so that percentage would be taken off of the fall disbursement, and then the other half of the loan gets disbursed in the spring semester. So again, the loan fee would apply to the spring semester as well. The next question, how do I know if I'm signing in as a parent or student on the FAFSA? The student would sign in under his or her application as the student applicant, and then when it would ask for parent information, then you would indicate the parent information. Okay, the next question on 529 plans, if the parent has two kids in school, the value of both 529 plans are entered as the parent assets, not the student. Is this correct? Yes, that is correct. And it it is correct whether the students are in school at the same time or not. You could have one of your students being in high school and one of your students being in college. So basically the value of the total asset of the 529 plans are entered in the parent section, not the students. And you want to make sure you do that correctly, because in the FAFSA formula, the parent assets are weighed less heavily than the students. So you want to be sure that you're reporting that correctly. The next question is an unsubsidized loan based on need, or can anyone get this loan? The unsubsidized loan is not based on need. So every single student who applies for financial aid will be eligible for a Stafford loan. What portion of it is subsidized versus unsubsidized is based on showing financial need. But yes, anyone will be eligible as long as you are meeting the other eligibility requirements for citizenship, then you would be eligible for an unsubsidized Stafford loan. The next question, my daughter received a scholarship. Do we still need to file the FAFSA? It's highly recommended that you do file the FAFSA. The merit scholarships are simply based on merit, but you will never know if your student might qualify for something else unless you do file the FAFSA. Again, I recommend strongly that you file the FAFSA for at least the first year, and then if you decide not to file it in continuing years, that's up to you. The next question, how are assets of a small business owner treated? That happens to be a question on the FAFSA. And the federal government defines, the Federal Department of Education defines a small business owner as having less than 100 employees. So if your business has less than 100 employees, then you would not be reporting the value of that at all. If you have more than 100, if you are the owner and controller of the business which has more than 100 employees, then you would report the net value of that business. So let's pretend like your business is worth $100,000 and you have debt on that business of $50,000, then you would only be reporting $50,000, the difference, the net value. But again, that's only if the business that you own and control has more than 100 employees. The next question, do we call admissions or financial aid to confirm that a FAFSA has been received? The answer is we're really one office, so you can call our Student Financial Services office number and we will confirm that for you once we begin to download the FAFSAs. But at Hofstra we have not begun to download the FAFSA applications yet. Our computer personnel need some time to implement the new year computer system. Okay. The next question, is there a deadline to make a decision and keep scholarship funds? May 1st is the national reply date. At Hofstra, we would certainly want you to try to make a decision sooner so that, that we can take a look at our entire application pool. But you really need to check this with other schools as well because they may have deadlines that could be sooner than that. The next question, are scholarships first come, first served? The answer to that is basically no. As long as you meet our scholarship criteria, you would be eligible for a scholarship. Some transfer students, depending on the fall and spring semester and budgetary concerns, may or may not receive a scholarship, so you would certainly want to be the early applicant. Should we fill out the 2013 FAFSA as soon as possible? What do you recommend? Firstly, for students entering Hofstra in the fall 2014 term, that's this coming fall, you would need to fill out the 2014-15 FAFSA, and that should be by February 15th at Hofstra. Other schools may require a different deadline. We consider it more of a preferred deadline. It doesn't mean that you won't receive financial aid if you file it after February 15th, but there are some forms of financial aid that there's the potential for running out of that you may have otherwise qualified for, but it will also give you that extra time so that you can make your final decision as to where you're going to be able to go to. Will verification go to the student or to the parent? All of the communication with the families will be addressed to the student for particular information. We may send out parent notices with general information, but when it comes to the required documentation, everything will be addressed to the student. Okay, we have some questions pertaining to particular lines on the FAFSA, which I can't really answer at this moment, but let me just tell you that when you're online completing the FAFSA, it will tell you exactly which line of the tax return, if you're filing a 1040 or a 1040A or a 1040EZ, which line of the tax return to look at to enter the information onto the FAFSA. And again, if you have any questions about that, you can certainly call the toll-free number, 1-800-4FED8, and they'll help you find that on your tax return if you're not as familiar with it. The next question, is there any assistance for students with disabilities? Yes, there are some forms of financial aid, so I would encourage you to file the FAFSA as well as inquire with our Office for Students Services with Disabilities. Okay, so what is the average amount of financial aid given? For our New Year students, it's typically in the 20,000 range. It really depends on, we can break it down by a lot of different categories, but the bottom line is that 94% of our incoming students do receive financial aid, and it's very important that you file the FAFSA to see what you will be eligible for. Okay, the next question, if a student took college-level courses in high school, should we check attended college before first year? No. That's not what the FAFSA is looking for. So you would check the box for first year, attending the first year this year. Again, we have some other particular asset savings vehicle account questions. I would encourage you to call the 1-800 number and identify your particular savings vehicle and discuss if it should be reported under the parent section or the student section. We have another question. I own my own business. Do I include business tax returns and business income on the FAFSA as well? The answer is no. When you're completing the FAFSA, your business income will follow through to your personal tax return. So that would be on your 1040. So if you were showing the income, that would already be included as part of your 1040 where it will ask for the adjusted gross income. Some schools might ask you for copies of business tax returns because they may wish to scrutinize their institutional grants more thoroughly, but that would probably be a rare case. Next question, if we know we are not eligible for many grants, is there still a possibility that we can get additional grants from Hofstra? Yes, there's definitely a possibility, but if you don't file the FAFSA, you won't know for sure. So please file the FAFSA. Where can I find the worksheet on the FAFSA? You can go onto FAFSA.gov. It's a little tricky to get into, but we will email you the specific link. We had that in our slide. So once you get the link, you'll be able to click on the exact link, or just, call the toll-free number 1-800-4FED-AID, and they'll help you get to that spot on the FAFSA.gov website. Okay, what about veterans, children, scholarships? Hofstra does participate in veterans benefits, so if you are giving if you're a veteran and you're entitled to benefits that you can pass on to your children, we definitely have those. In our alumni relations department, we do have some descendants of alumni, or we have some veteran scholarships, so you can take a look at their web page. Their applications are usually posted online at the Alumni Relations website by the end of January. Okay, the next question, is there a special form if you're a widow? No. The FAFSA will provide a box, though, that you would check if you are a widow. So you would just complete the FAFSA and check that particular form. Okay, next question. If updating tax information once a previously estimated FAFSA was filed, do we update all other numbers too, like bank account balances? No, you would not do that. When you update information or correct information, you should only be updating income. You do not go back into the FAFSA to change any kind of assets like your bank accounts or stocks or anything like that. That's a one point in time kind of snapshot. Next question, how do the FAFSA awards affect scholarships? We build a financial aid package around the scholarships, so we would certainly look at your need-based grant if you were eligible, let's say, for the federal Pell Grant, as well as the scholarships, but we layer the different kinds of eligibility on top of the scholarships. Okay, next question. If salary changes based on commission, is that a reason for supplemental information? That's certainly something that we would, at Hofstra, take a look at. So you would request our reevaluation form and submit the appropriate documentation, and we would see if that would help get you any additional financial aid. Okay, the next question is income reported on the FAFSA based on gross salary or after deductions? The main questions on the FAFSA are asking for your adjusted gross income, federal taxes paid, and things like that. It will tell you exactly which line from your tax return to report. But I do highly recommend that you call the FAFSA toll-free number when filling it out, because they can walk you step by step through not only the FAFSA online, but they're trained to know which lines of your tax returns and W-2 forms to look at. Okay. Next question, does FAFSA consider having other children looking at money in the bank? Yes. So when you're filling out the FAFSA, it will ask for the number of household members that are residing in your household and how many are going to college other than the student that you're applying for on that FAFSA. So basically, the more members of the household and the more members of students going to college at the same time, the less the FAFSA considers that you're able to contribute towards your student's education. Next question, if I, as the parent, have investments with my child as the co-owner, like a joint bank account, does the asset get reported under my information or the student's? Basically, if there are jointly held assets, then you would report half under the parent information and half under the student information. Okay. There's a question pertaining to a particular veteran's benefit as to whether or not it needs to be reported on the FAFSA, I would suggest that you call the toll-free number and tell them the exact form of that, and they would be able to tell you if that's reportable or not. Okay, the next question, how soon can we request tax return transcripts? That partly depends on how quickly you process your 2013 tax returns. So once you file your tax returns, there will be a lag in between, and that's totally up to the IRS. But new for this year, they did just announce that you will be able to request the tax return transcript online. So you can go to irs.gov. You would be able to pull that up and print that out, but there will be, a little bit of a time lag between when your tax return is processed and then when you can actually print out the tax return transcript. Next question, is there a negative to filing the FAFSA? If there is, I certainly cannot think of one. I can only think of positive things for filing a FAFSA, especially because people assume that they might not be eligible for something, but even if, let's say, the student ends up wanting to take out a student loan, you never know if there's a study abroad program or maybe a winter session or summer course, and they might want to take a student loan or work at a federal work-study position. You're never going to know what you're eligible for unless you actually file. Question about federal work-study. Are students allowed to use federal work-study for spending money while in college, or do they have to sign the checks over to pay for tuition? Basically, the federal work-study program is in the form of a paycheck to the student. So we indicate if the student is eligible or not in their financial aid package. They have to apply for the jobs and get the job, and then they get paid in the form of a paycheck. So that's up to the student as to how they're going to choose to spend it. So some of them might pay later on, let's say save the money and pay towards their spring semester or use it for books or what have you. But that's really up to the student when they get the paycheck. Next question, does parent loan debt get entered as debt on the FAFSA? No, it does not. It's only against any particular asset that you have. So let's say if you own a rental property and the rental property is worth $200,000 and there's a $50,000 mortgage on it, then you would subtract that mortgage and just report that net value. Otherwise, only debts that are associated with particular assets are reported on the FAFSA. Okay, next question. Do we have to file the FAFSA to renew Hofstra scholarships every year? No, not for merit-based scholarships. We do not require the FAFSA to get it in the beginning or to renew it. But again, there could be some other types of scholarships that the student becomes eligible for along the way, like donor scholarships that you might need to file a FAFSA to be eligible to renew it. For the full criteria, I would highly recommend that you take a look at our website, hofstra.edu/scholarship, and you can take a look at our eligibility and renewal criteria for Hofstra aid. Let's see. Is there a specific level of income for which the student will not be eligible for aid from the FAFSA? No, it's not just based on income. Every student who's qualified to file a FAFSA is eligible for a Stafford loan at a minimum. The FAFSA is a complicated formula, and it's based on the calculation of all the information you put on it. So that includes income, assets, how many people are in your family, how many of your children are going to college at the same time. Basically, everything you put on the FAFSA factors into the formula. Now, that's very different from TAP, though. TAP is based directly on the net taxable income, your New York net taxable income plus any untaxed pension income. So for TAP, The total income cannot be over $80,000 for dependent students to qualify. So again, for TAP, the net taxable income plus any untaxed pension income, the cutoff is $80,000. Next question, explain the $5,500 limit. Is that all we can borrow for the year? So out of that one particular loan program, the Stafford Loan Program, which is a student loan, that is the maximum a student can borrow the first year. As they move up in grade level, sophomores can borrow an additional $1,000. It goes up a little bit, but that's all in that particular loan program. So the government does this. They limit the student loans to try to help limit the student borrowing. And that's where the parent loans come in. So the parent loans can borrow up to the full cost of education, and also the private lenders. That's on our summary chart. You could take a look at those loan programs and compare them because you can borrow as much as you need to cover the full cost of attendance with that. But that $5,500 limit, that's the federal limit for the federal Stafford loan only. Okay, next question. Do we recommend completing the FAFSA before filing the tax returns? Yes, I absolutely do. That is if you cannot file your FAFSA by the college deadline. So if you are not able to file your tax return by February 15th, go ahead and file the FAFSA based on estimated numbers, and then go back into the system and change it. And then the next part of this question is, would we get flagged for an audit? At Hofstra, the Department of Education doesn't not call it an audit, so it's not that we would be auditing you, but some FAFSAs are selected for verification of the information that you put on the FAFSA, so we cannot predict which ones will get picked and which ones won't. It's not a single indicator that you would definitely get picked for the verification process, but the bottom line is you want to file the FAFSA by the deadlines so that you know your final answer and that you don't miss out on financial aid. So if it is necessary, go ahead, file the FAFSA based on estimated numbers, then go back and load the information for the correct information once you have filed that. The next question, does the FAFSA need to be completed prior to the CSS profile? No. Actually, the College Board opens up the application sometime in October each year. You'll find very few colleges do require the CSS profile application, but that's in October, whereas the FAFSA is available in January. And the next question, do you include child support as income? Yes. So when filing the FAFSA, the child support received for all children in the household for the year has to be reported under the parent section. Okay, this concludes our webinar. Thank you all so much for participating. If we were unable to answer your direct questions, we will send you an email answering them individually, and we will follow up with an email with the link to this recorded webinar. Have a great day.